What's going on, everybody, to the 33rd episode, I believe. I think I actually counted right the last time when I said we don't know how to count our episodes, but I think we actually are on track. So I think this is episode 33. So we're in a different situation for both of us. I just got done doing Talk Heathen on Sunday, so I don't have my normal setup up. So we will be doing this. I'll be doing this setup with a really crappy light in front of me that's blinding me. So if you see me look down a little bit more, it's because I don't want to look straight at the sun. But Cease, how you doing today, man? What's going on?
Doing okay. Your appearance on Talk Heathen was great. I really enjoyed watching that. My end, I co-hosted the EA show for an episode, and that was a really good time.
You got to you had like not really a debate, it was like a mini discussion with a Catholic about
it was
Thomism
like
and things like that, right?
Yeah, it was more like an interview, but there was a little bit of pushback from me here and there. And then I was there on the after party, and there were a bunch of other people that jumped on. And actually, one of the guys that was on there, I would like to get on our show because I think we could have an interesting conversation. I was also on the Prometheus Experience show, I think a couple of weeks ago. And those guys seem really nice as well. So that was a good time.
Yeah, we'll try to mirror what we can. Don't think I'll have the Talk Heathen thing mirrored to keep that exclusive to the ACA, but I think we can try to get some of the stuff that we'll be doing in the future. Cease is going to be doing I guess before we get to that real fast, before we get to the future, let's stick with the past real quick. Typically, if anyone that's new, we got like 200 subscribers after Talk Heathen, so thank you greatly for everyone that subscribed. So anyone that's new, we typically, when we have conversations, we'll come back on the next episode and kind of go with where we went wrong, maybe things that we said backwards with our dyslexic minds, or what we meant to say and things like that. And so I kind of wanted to start off and say thank you to everybody that came from Talk Heathen over here, and then also my first thing that I had in my mind afterwards that I kind of kicked myself on was the usage of too much esoteric language. I think I'm so used to talking with you, Cease, in this like niche field and then more on Discord, that I forget that there's just a better way to explain this to people that don't necessarily get into these things. And it's like, talking physics with somebody that doesn't understand physics in that sense, or music theory to a musician that might not know music. So in hindsight, I'm definitely going to try to work on that and make it a little bit more clear as to what I'm conveying, as opposed to using kind of confusing language.
Yeah, that's something that I really struggle with too, because that language is so secondary to me that I forget that you need a certain level of background to know what those words even mean. So I'm trying to learn how to be more aware of that, and especially if I want to teach for a living, that's probably something that I need to get better with.
Yeah, exactly. But anyway, in the future now, we got Cisa. You're doing a little debate championship thing. It's in really just good humor. I actually might become one of the judges. I don't know. I'm not sure if that's
a conflict of interest.
Yeah, I literally said it might be a conflict of interest, so I might not be able to judge your debate. But yeah, why don't you before we get onto the video, why don't you tell them about that and who might be involved and who's running it and things like that.
Yeah, so it's going to be on March 20th, and I think it's going to be an all-day thing, which is crazy. Like, it's going to be really intense for me. But the TAR channel is running it, and I think there's 16 debaters, so 4 rounds, I believe. And we only get, like, a little bit of time to prepare between each round. So that's going to also be interesting to see, like, are we able to prepare enough to really do well, especially when we don't know the topics right away.
Yeah. That's kind of why I was like, I don't know, I might watch you from afar, because I don't think I'd thrive in that environment. So I give you.
I don't know that I will either, but I think I just like to. I just wanted to test to see how it goes.
Sure, of course.
Of course. So it's funny because the first round, I'm debating our good friend Jeff, the atheist troll, who's been on here a couple times.
Yeah.
He runs his own channel and he's also part of Tart. And so I'm going to be debating him in the first round. And then if I get past him and T-Jump gets past his first opponent, of course it's going to end up being me and T-Jump.
And that I'm going to have like buckets of popcorn for. That'll be so great. So.
Yeah. So if I can get past T-Jump, I think that championship is mine. I feel like T-Jump is the one that I'm really concerned about, because he always seems to have an answer ready and can express it in a much more concise and clear way than I can. So
yeah,
I'm really going to have to be on my A game. But no,
I think
really
you'll smash him, honestly. So
no,
but I'm biased, so there's that. But
but so it's funny because the Tart guys wanted me to record a promo, and I should have sent it to you so we could have played it in here. But whatever. A promo kind of talking shit against Jeff.
Hold on. Let me, because you're coming from your position, so let me say from a different position. It was really good because you start off with it just going, I don't really talk shit, and then you ended off with like the most ultimate shit talking, and I was like, that's awesome, like brilliantly done.
Cringy.
It was like a wrestling promo. It was just like, yes, that's how you do it right there. But
yeah, like I'm not a loud person. I'm not gonna be able to do the whole like yelling Hulk Hogan type of, like, that makes me cringe. Let me tell you something, dude. There's no way I could ever do that. And so I was just trying to do a more like laid back, more quiet assassin type of thing.
Sure, yeah.
And I don't know who noticed, but it's funny because I was playing the. Have you seen Dragon Ball Z? Have you ever watched that?
I grew up watching that, so of course.
Yeah. So the music in the back throughout the whole promo was a cover of when Goku turned Super Saiyan 3.
Yeah.
In the show.
Mm-hmm.
So
I don't think anybody in the on the panel caught that, but I thought that was a good.
But I think someone in the audience listening did, because they mentioned it. I mean, so that was a good time. But yeah, we'll see. We'll see how this goes.
I think the prize for that's what, $666 or something like that.
Dude, I won the prize money.
So so be on the lookout for that. Go to the Atheist Roundtable if you guys aren't familiar with that. If you go back and you like their channel, go back to the very beginning. I hosted about 60 or so episodes with them from the beginning of that. So if you enjoy what they do and you enjoy what we do, you can get a little combination of that. Cease is on there as well, and episodes as well. So we're all a tight-knit family. But anyway, let's get to the meat of everything and why we're here. And people are saying we look suave tonight, which is awesome. I'm giving me some confidence before we get into this. I feel like I don't have my green screen behind me, and I'm wearing I typically don't think red's good on me, but hey, I'm loving it. So let's do it.
No, you look good.
All right. So if you guys aren't familiar, we've done a few Inspiring Philosophy videos. We didn't really vet any of the ones we've done. We just kind of like, this is an impromptu episode. We just kind of like, hey, you want to do this tonight? And so this is kind of how we're going to treat this one. Sometimes we'll go a little bit more in depth. This is just going to be pretty much our thoughts right away.
By the way, in case anything freezes, because StreamYard is always giving us problems, we'll be back in case everything just collapses.
Yeah, StreamYard's been having an issue, and I have storms like right behind me. So, but I think I'm good. I was hardwired. I just looked down at my connection. I'm no longer hardwired, so that fell out. But we'll manage. That'll work. All right.
Faith means belief in something without evidence.
We seeing it?
Believe something without evidence.
No. Yes.
Justifies anything. You're no longer vulnerable to somebody coming back at you and saying, hang on a minute, let me argue the case. If you believe it without evidence, which is what faith is, then you don't argue the case. You say, no, I'm not arguing that case. This is my faith. It's mine. It's private. I don't dissent from it. I don't retreat from it. You're just going to have to accept it. Now, that is evil.
Many atheists allege that having faith is the absence of having evidence. When Christians claim they have faith in something.
All right, so let's stop right there real quick. You're an atheist, right? See, so do you think faith entails a lack of evidence? Would be agreement on there?
I know that the term has been used in different ways. I would say, yeah, that's probably the term, the version that I tend to go with more. But I know that I've also seen like a different type of approach, but which ultimately still fails regardless.
Mhm.
So for me, I don't ever really care about like tell me how it is that you define the term for yourself, and then we can deal with that. And
I agree.
because all this stuff is interpreted differently. Like there have been times where I've talked to Christians. It's not my definition. I've talked to Christians and they've said, well, I don't need evidence because I take it on faith. Like that's how they've defined it. So to them, faith is that. Now, if there are other Christians that interpret it differently, then I'll deal with those and those definitions. So there's not a unified, thing there.
Sure. Yeah, I would. It seems like, at least I haven't vetted this, so I'm just going to guess that this is going to go into the aspect of trust, that faith means trust. And I just want to say off the bat, if it gets into that, I think atheists actually make a mistake saying that it can't be trust. Like that is an issue. Sure, I am perfectly okay with faith meaning confidence or trust. Confidence and trust doesn't entail you have a good reason for the trust, right? I can trust that I have $1 million in my bank account. Doesn't actually mean that I do. There's no there's no entailment of that I have evidence because I trust it. I'm
okay with the trust definition. Like, it doesn't make any difference to me.
Exactly. So I want to throw that out there, that if that's a problem to anybody that is an atheist in the comments, please let us know why you think that entails that. I would say that trust is fine. The issue is trying to use evidence as a safety net. So it's like the second you say, well, look, I can use faith to justify X and you can use faith to justify Y, the other person go, well, I actually have evidence. And it's like they have this safety net underneath it to catch them in case there's some actual counter argument that makes them think. So, but yeah, we'll continue.
Something. They are really saying they don't have evidence. So they need to fill in their lack of evidence with faith. The reality is this is nothing more than a misrepresentation of what faith actually is for most Christians and how faith is defined in the New Testament. So let's begin by looking at what the New Testament actually says. The Greek word for faith is pistis, which is used to mean loyalty or assurance in something. In fact, we never see the word necessarily used to mean a substitute for evidence or believing in something without evidence. It is more or less very similar to the idea of being loyal or having trust in something.
Okay, we've already hit it really quickly. So it's very similar to the idea of being loyal or having trust in something. Cool. I don't have a problem with that. There's no entailment that the trust that you have is necessitated by any epistemic justification. There's no entailment that you have warrant. There's no entailment that, from my perspective, it seems to walk this line. I could be wrong, but it seems to walk this line of like doxastic voluntarism, where you kind of like choose your belief, where you have some control over that power of choosing your belief, and to think that you can choose that type of trust. I always argue that I think the person has a reason why they believe. If they're using faith, like I always feel like you could get a little bit underneath that. That might be a different topic for a different day. But yeah, I don't have any problem with trust. I just don't think that entails evidence. What would you say? Same thing.
That's fine. All I care about is why do you have that trust in that something or that someone?
Exactly.
Do you have good reasons for that? It's the reasons that matter.
Thing or someone. It is not denoted to mean that which is used as the means to form trust in something or someone. A good example can be seen in.
So now is that just so it's not denoted to mean that which is used as the means to form. So he's basically saying it's not being used as the methodology at which you gain the trust. Okay, well then at that case, you're just telling me you trust something. So if I go up to somebody and I say like, I have faith that your God doesn't exist, and they say I have faith that my God does exist, we now have like kind of an issue of just saying, okay, well, I trust that your God doesn't exist. Well, I trust that mine doesn't exist. Okay, so what's the methodology that got you there?
Right.
That's the big gap that we've left out of this thing. Because if we're both using faith, it seems to me that we're both going to introduce something new to try to distinguish from the opposition, right? To try to get you away from being at that stalemate.
And that's what theists never understand, is that everybody has faith in contradictory claims. Therefore, how do we move forward to showing which claim actually makes sense and it's justified as opposed to any other. But let's see where he goes with this.
Sure.
Acts 17:31. He has fixed a day on which he will judge the world in righteousness by a man whom he has appointed, and of this he has given assurance, piston, to all by raising him from the dead. Notice pistis is the assurance we have in the future promises, which results from the evidence of the resurrection. Faith is in the absence of evidence. It is what results from evidence.
Okay, so he's saying that he's propping it up with evidence. So
Okay.
the faith aspect, what is the... So essentially, with any idea that you have that you think is true, couldn't you just simply say, well, I have trust in it, or I have faith in it, right? And then if we get into the aspect of, is that your methodology, seems like he's just going to concede, no, it's not my methodology. Okay, so why are we doing this entire video so far about the fact that, hey, look, this is faith, this doesn't entail the evidence, but I do have it. It is somewhere. It's in a box somewhere. I can go grab it. I can go get you the evidence.
Okay, so he just
Why
saying
don't we do
that.
that? What's the problem with that? Why don't we
He
go
just-
get the box and show the evidence, right?
So he just saying that the faith is just trust in evidence. This is why religious people try to play the game that, you know, when you believe in science, you believe you have faith in the same way that you do with religion. When obviously the gigantic difference is what we consider evidence, the methodology we apply to call one thing evidence and one thing not evidence. So, I mean, even the fact that he's talking about the resurrection as being evidence, he's already failed there.
Well, it seems to me that if you say, like, if you just like modus ponens it, right, you go, because what he's saying is that it results from evidence. So you could say Y results from X, right? So you have faith being the result of evidence. It seems to me like if you say, okay, if X, then Y, X, therefore Y. So if I have evidence, I have faith. I have evidence, therefore faith. Well, it seems that it just seems really weird that we play that game when the evidence is, yes, if you have evidence for something, we're going to grant automatically that Y will follow, that you have some form of trust or justification in what it is that you believe, right? Like that seems to be, that's the issue that seems to just be kind of glancing over in some realm. But
I just want to respond to a quick comment real quick. Science is a kind of blind faith. What evidence do you have that we should value evidence? I'm not presupposing that we should value evidence. I recognize its usefulness as a tool because I'm a part of the world. It's like, if I want to see whether or not a pen works, I pick it up and I use it and check if it works. I'm not presupposing anything there. So, you know, I don't see any kind of blind anything in science. It's,
well, yeah, it seems that you're going to if you go to an abductive assessment that way, it's like at least you gain so you can get the hypothesis. But the difference between the science is that you actually make the extra steps after the abductive assessment for a hypothesis, right? Like say that's I have to inference to the best explanation. You gather that and you form conjecture or hypothesis. The difference between that and the faith. So faith stops there at the hypothesis of what they think is what they just have trust is most likely. Science just goes the extra step to say, here is how we actually test that and provide a new prediction or provide some way of falsification or some way of verifying what it is. It doesn't stop at just the conjecture of trust.
Yeah, well, what we need is a method that can separate the imagined from the actual. Like that's what matters. Science seems to provide this in a way that religion doesn't. Now, if anybody has another way of doing that, where you can show why something is justified and why something is true outside of anybody's own psychology, then I'll accept that. I'm not necessarily stuck on the idea that it has to be science. It's just that I've never seen any kind of method that is able to do what science does.
Yeah, and it seems that he's also like, if it results from evidence, right? You're saying that faith results from evidence. Well, then now you're saying there is some, I mean, if we're talking about evidence, we're talking about inductive evidence, some empirical evidence, and it seems that you're just conceding that you should have that, right? If faith follows from the evidence, then what is X that gets us to Y?
So, and a follow-up comment I should reply to. You atheists have faith that all the science you don't understand is correct. A believer has faith in God in the same way. mean, there's a very important difference there. Is that, again, the scientific method has the capacity to make predictions, has explanatory power, and is dependent on experiments that are empirically based. Like, we can test those things in a way that you can test religious beliefs. And also, it's also, the first part is also untrue. I don't take anything a science says as true with certainty. It seems to work. I don't claim that we get certainty from science. It's that we get something more than from any other approach. Science changes with new evidence. You never prove a theory true. You just show, you always are in the process of trying to falsify it. And the more times it passes that falsification, the stronger the theory becomes. And the difference is, yes, I don't have the capacity to examine every claim that every scientist makes. But the difference is that if I wanted to, there's a way to actually go and do that. I can't test the claims of religion. I have no way of showing that the claims of religion are not more than psychological projections. That's not the same thing when it comes to science. It's just a different way of testing those ideas. It's just not, it's just not the same thing.
Because God has given evidence through his resurrection, we can therefore have faith or assurance.
Okay, so now we just hit what X is to give us Y, right? So the evidence is X, the faith is Y. So the evidence. So I'm expecting him to go over that. If he glances over that, just goes on to faith again, then we're missing the part that says, "Is faith blind?" Right? He's just saying it's propped up on evidence. Well, give us the biblical faith and show us how exactly it's propped up by the specific.
Let's see what this evidence for the resurrection is.
Assurance in the future promises he has given. 1 Peter 1:6-7 says, "In this you rejoice, though now for a little while, if necessary, you have been grieved by various trials, so that the tested genuineness of your pistis, more precious than gold that perishes, though it is tested by fire, may be found to result in praise, in glory and honor at the revelation of Jesus Christ." As you can see, here the word pistis is defined as loyalty to God. The words faith, belief, and trust are all similar to one another. I have faith in my bank.
Okay. I'm going to let this continue. There's a lot I have to say, but I want to hear this part.
Or I could say I trust them not to steal all my money because I have good evidence to have this faith.
He's just conflating faith with trust, which is fine. But then the conversation doesn't matter because it's like, yes, if you believe something is true, if you think you have knowledge, we're asking you about the justification part, right? That's now where the conversation goes, not how much you can equivocate faith and trust. It's like, fine, we concede that. What gives you the trust? Like, what entails that you have trust?
Right. Sorry, quick.
Go ahead.
I don't know if I should respond to all these comments later on. It keeps popping up, and my OCD is crazy.
We'll go back to him unless you want to do one real quick.
I'll just do one real quick. He said, Jonah says, "There's evidence for God." Here it is. "Every culture adopts religious ideas because all cultures have made contact with the divine. Otherwise, how do you explain the appearance of God in every culture?" That's not evidence that God exists. The fact that people believe something doesn't add any credibility to it one iota. I can explain that in psychological ways. Like, people are afraid of death. People didn't understand anything about the world when they were here. And so they try to use God as an explanation for mystery, for what they didn't understand. Belief in God, it doesn't matter how many people believe it. Doesn't mean that's not evidence that they make contact with the divine. That's evidence that we have certain psychological tendencies given the context of our position in the world, and our fears and our wishful thinking and our desire to live forever and our desire to see our family after this life. Like, there's many many reasons we could point to why why this idea of God has been prevalent in culture. It doesn't mean it's true.
Yeah, and I would just abductively say that, you know, when you look at just the fact that I don't remember if it's Matt that someone used this example from a while back, but the kind of the rustling in the bushes, right? You kind of run away from the sound, you move on, you proliferate, and you know your genes are passed on. The ones that stand there and find out, and then it ends up being a lion, you know, they don't. So there's this aspect of agency with how we view the world, or even in regards to like pareidolia and how we see shapes and things like that play on that psychological factor of denoting something to having some agent causation, right? When it might not in any way. It might be the wind or something in the example
Right.
of the bush. But so I to argue ad populum is just a horrible way to start, unless you're just trying to say, hey, this word means this because more people use it. Yeah, I'll grant you that. But ad populum for evidence of your God is just a really sloppy way to present your argument.
I have faith or trust that when I walk down the street, most people will not stab me, because there are good reasons to think most people in society are not psychotic, or at least fear the repercussions of the law. Faith is not the absence of evidence, it is the result of evidence. We have faith in something, like our bank or society, because we have good reasons to place our faith in these things.
Okay. So that's the equivocation part, that it's like, no. So it's like, I get trust. We can say trust and faith. We can equivocate that in ways. If you say that's what I mean, that's fine.
Okay.
But when I say I have trust in something like my bank account or my bank not stealing it, it is prepped up on that evidence, right? That's not how I'm going to sit there and say that I know for certain, right? Obviously, but at no point am I ever going to make any declaration that I know for certain. But I'm going to use the past evidence, right? I have no problem with any of that.
What he's saying is fine.
What is the evidence is what I care about, right? Like, what gives you that assurance is what matters here.
Yeah, right. What he's saying is fine if he actually has good evidence to believe in things like the resurrection in his particular religion. Like, so provide that evidence and we can analyze it appropriately.
Yeah, I would just say it's just weird to call it faith as a method, or not a methodology. I'm sorry. It's weird to call it faith as if that's what everybody has in virtue of trust. It seems to me when you look at like Hebrews 11:1 or something like that, you get a little different taste on the biblical.
Yeah, that's the other thing. Those terms just get definitions get switched up.
But what I think we're both trying to say is that I don't have a problem with how the theist defines it. The same way if someone says, hey, I'm agnostic, and I might disagree with how they define agnostic, I just want to know what you mean. That's fine.
Right.
But it wastes so much time when we say I have faith in something, and then you just revert, like I said at the very beginning, back to the safety net of evidence. Because I don't really care now about faith. I care about what it is your evidence is. That's the only thing. I mean, what is any atheist going to have on their gravestone if it can't be their name? Show me the motherfucking evidence. That's going to be on their gravestone, right? Like that's what any atheist is generally going to ask. Especially when you're saying my faith is based on evidence. Cool. Show me what that is.
So let's see if he provides them.
Likewise, Christians place their faith in Jesus when we argue God has given us good reasons to trust him or be loyal to him. If you read through the New Testament, especially in Acts, no one gives their personal feelings or personal faith as a reason to believe in Jesus. The reality is they appeal to the evidence so people will place their faith in Christ. In Acts 2, Peter appeals to the miracle of tongues before them, the miracles Christ performed, the evidence of the resurrection, prophecies concerning him, and the witnesses available to speak with. Paul in Athens also appeals to evidence for the resurrection, namely the witnesses to this event. In Matthew 9:6, Jesus heals a paralyzed man so that they will have evidence or know he is the Son of Man. In John 14, Jesus tells the disciples to believe or have faith in him on the works they have seen him do. Even in Exodus 9:14, God told Pharaoh through Moses that the plagues will be given so that they may know there is no one like the Lord. The Bible constantly affirms for Christians to believe because of evidence, not through blind faith. Faith is the result of evidence. It is loyalty or trust in God, because he has given us evidence or revealed himself in some way. With this in mind, it helps us better understand several passages in the New Testament. Note the people who came.
You're muted. I can't hear you.
Sorry, that's my bad. We're 4 minutes and 47 seconds in, and he's only just defined the same thing the entire time. Just pointing that out.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm just pointing that he's only defined faith as being trust that has evidence. Cool. Well, what's the evidence?
Came to Jesus to ask for healing, and he said they were healed because of their faith. If we understand that pistis really means loyalty or trust in Jesus, then there is really no issue. Jesus told the Roman centurion that he had greater faith.
You know, I have faith that my stimulus check is going to have an extra zero at the end of it, and I'm really going to get $14,000 and not $14,000.
Why does loyalty come into it? Why would you need loyalty to evidence? I don't understand what that means.
I think it means obedience is really what
all
that
he's
is.
doing now. I mean, the fact that he used. I mean, God, it's just so bad. First of all, the Bible is the claim; it's not the evidence. So I truly don't give a damn what verses he's pointing to in the Bible, because we have no way of actually determining that any of these things happen. That's the first thing. The second thing is we know, because the last 100 of years of psychology, that people can believe things and be convinced and those things not be true. Like the fact that every religion makes these claims about healings and miracles, yet makes contradictory claims about the nature of the universe, shows that not all these religions can be true, just a matter of a fact about logic. And I think I brought this example up before, but there are many so-called miracles that people said there was, like the miracle of Fatima, for example, where people said that no other explanation was possible, and then we came to find out that they were just under a misinterpretation of what they were seeing. And these are things that happened, and they're facts about our psychology. We can actually test these things.
We've actually seen several perihelions since. Like people post them on TikTok saying there's two suns. They do this all the time. They don't understand it's just a perihelion.
How many known frauds that pretend to be religious go around the country healing people? And that is something called the placebo effect. That is the power of suggestion, that they think they're healed, and then a week later they're back to having the same issues that they had before, but now they have less money because it was taken from them by these religious frauds. Someone like Satya Sai Baba, who had almost all of the miracles of Jesus attributed to him, not in the first century context where people knew next to nothing about how the world functioned, but in the 21st century, college-educated, scientifically educated people thought that this guy was God on earth, and yet, his miracles didn't convince anybody who didn't already want to believe. These are just people don't know what evidence is. It just.
Well, that was my thing. Is if we start picking out the book there, then it's like if I start saying, I have faith, and I'm using it the way Michael used it here to say that I have trust, and it's based on evidence. Like, I'm glad that you're finding evidence to be valuable, but let's take that in my perspective. I look at a biology book and I go, I have faith that the Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium accounts for what it says it accounts for, whether we can measure evolution in a population or how much evolution is even occurring, right? Like let's just say if I go, well, on the next page, it gives me an example of these bunny rabbits, right? And it just gives me a little illustration and explains, hey, when these factors happen, non-random mating, all these types of factors happen, we can view this in the Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium, and we can see how much evolution is occurring. I wouldn't use that as evidence for the previous definition and say, well, here's the evidence right here after the page. We would actually have to go to a population to actually observe that, to see the allele frequencies, to see all those types
Right.
of things. And that is the evidence. You couldn't just
I mean,
go, hey, it's defined this way. It's worse because it's like, hey, where the trust comes from is defined in this book, but then I'm also going to use the book. It's like that's even worse of a problem from my vantage point.
Yeah, it's so bad when they're like, well, you trust in the physics book the way that we trust in the Bible. It's like, no, the book is relevant. I care about the data in the book that we can actually then go test out in the world
Yeah.
and actually confirm in the world. I can't confirm that any of these things actually happen. They're just stated as such. So it's a terrible way of reasoning.
Yeah, and someone could come back to you and say, what about abiogenesis, right? I mean, that's something that a lot of biochemists are going to concede to you. Like, maybe I can't, tell you for certain, or RNA on clay is maybe not but the difference there is there's based on evidence, but it's never at this point to give this Cartesian certainty of like, also from Y, it follows that if you don't accept Y, you burn forever, right? It's like that. There's none of that entailment either. So there's like a whole different category of how it actually,
and it's also ignoring the difference in the methodologies, like what it is different that science is doing that religion isn't doing. Religion can't make the same type of predictions. It's not based on empirical data. I mean, they're trying to say that it is, but why is it that every time science goes in to try to analyze these testimony of healings, nothing is resolved?
Yeah. And I actually want to answer this real fast before we move on. Can you guys explain why science does not prove a single thing? Yeah, because science is under like an aspect of fallibilism. So it's already conceding at the beginning that knowledge isn't going to have this certainty of justification. We have problems of induction, but it doesn't stop us from getting a science of medicine. It doesn't stop your grandma, my grandma, his grandma, anybody being able to take benefit within the methodology that's imposed. It doesn't prove it. It models. The best way I like to put it is it's like a mirror that you play. Science is just a method, but if it's done well, right, you can actually put this mirror next to reality, and you shouldn't be able to tell the difference. The model at which you make should reflect reality, but at the same time, you're going to always say, at some level, we could be wrong. At some level, our understanding could be falsified. And that's, to me, the best way to go about any knowledge, because then you don't dogmatically put yourself in a situation where X is always right. I don't like that world. The better worldview for me is to say I hold X tentatively until, someone can come along and disprove that. That's the honest way about assessing things. So there's no proof. It's modeling.
Yeah, I mean this endless debate with someone on TikTok who says that if I can't have certainty in my worldview, then no belief is better than another. It's like you just don't understand epistemology.
And also like there's some aspects. It kind of bothers me to think that I could know something fully in some sense, because it kind of takes the aspect of discovery out. The next generations that come after.
Fully.
Well, yeah, but it's to say like the idea that not having Cartesian truth gives us is discovery. Right. But someone could come in and say, well, you're not actually discovering anything because you don't know if it's true. But that's the whole thing. That's what makes this great. We're still figuring things out and providing results. So it's not moot. There's nothing there that's devalued. It's kind of the same argument of just to say, because I can reduce how love is to some chemical component, it doesn't have value anymore or something. It's like these they're just non sequiturs. They don't really apply for my, and that's according to me. I mean but anyway.
Than anyone in Israel. The centurion trusted that Jesus could simply heal by speaking a word, but he trusted that Jesus could do this because he had heard of or seen prior evidence of Jesus' miracles. His faith or trust in Jesus was not blind, but built on evidence. The woman with the issue of
how do we know that?
Blood
we don't
believed Jesus could heal her because she had heard of his power. Both of these cases and many others show people who came to Jesus had great faith because they had good reasons or evidence to place their loyalty or trust in Jesus. It was never a blind belief. It was faith because of prior evidence.
How do we know that? We're just glancing. Go ahead.
it's faith based on unawareness of psychology, because the fact that healings can take place and the psychology behind that is well understood in psychology. Tell all the people that had their money taken from them by frauds pretending to be prophets or God, who performed fake healings that you can. I mean, do you know who Darren Brown is? Have you ever heard of Darren Brown? You're muted again.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. A magician illusionist, right?
I mean, he literally has pretended to be
a faith
he
healer.
did a whole thing on faith healing.
Yeah, that was great. That was a great thing.
So that takes place. People think that it was real. So according to him, those people had good evidence that those healings took place, despite the fact that the entire program was to show how fallacious and fraudulent these type of conversations are. Yeah, right. Yet we're supposed to take this type of testimony more seriously when it happened in a pre-scientific world, millennia ago.
Well, isn't it ironic too that it's like, my trust on something's built on evidence. And then he's like, this person, they had evidence. It's like, yeah, but now you have this gap between trusting that. You have this gap of where's the evidence that you would even know that that's the case. Like you put this, and then for you to say, well, it says so here, so I trust. Now you're just begging the question.
Yeah, like that's
so now your evidence is just based on having your conclusion within your premises.
And the evidence has to be based on something that's repeatable, testable, over and over again. Like that's how science operates. Even if the people who knew Jesus at the time had good evidence, so to speak, which again, I don't think that counts given what we understand about psychology, but that's them. That's not us, because we're so far removed from that we have no way of knowing that any of that actually took place.
Sure.
Jesus replied constantly, their loyalty or trust in him has made them whole. Believing in Jesus as Lord and healer is what was really important. Even Christians who are not into apologetics do not typically have faith on a lack of evidence. They typically cite some personal religious experience they had, where they felt the presence of God. So they are admitting they place.
Okay, that's
not evidence. This was back when it was legal, so I'm not incriminating myself. But back when it was legal, I did a substance called salvia, right? That altered the chemistry of my brain. I thought I was hanging out with aliens. I had this very strong feeling about it. It doesn't make it true, especially since people have these experiences without the aids of any substances. They just have different neurological or physiological, I wouldn't call them issues, but.
And people have these experiences even not being religious. Like, you have to show how, religious people are presupposing a certain kind of transformative experiences point to the divine, rather than potentially pointing to just a fact about consciousness that you can access even as an atheist. Like, is it that you're contacting the divine, or is it that this is just something that we can do as human beings, is have certain types of experiences? I've had out-of-body experiences listening to music. So what? Like, it doesn't mean anything.
Instead of typing this, I'm going to just say this because this isn't what our podcast is really about, but I disagree with that, because I think the arbitrary assessment of what a mystical experience is, the candidate explanation of what one would be, hasn't been demonstrated. So for me, the person who claims mystical experiences has a burden of proof to show why a heroin user nodding out in pure bliss isn't just as a mystical experience as someone that consumes DMT. And for you to say that because there's a lethal aspect to it is just an arbitrary barrier between that. But that would be my response to that, is it's the burden of proof still on the person saying with the mystical experiences, because from my understanding in that realm, most of those are ineffable, meaning that they can't give you a noetic experience because you can't even describe what goes on anyway. So it just seems to be a useless method of gaining truth, even if there was one. But that's all I'll say on that. We'll do an episode on mysticism. Hopefully we'll have Kafi Coffee on, because that's his bag. That's what he likes to talk about. So hopefully we'll have him on.
Their faith in Jesus when they received evidence.
He said I didn't actually come back and ask him to come on the show, and I'm pretty sure he was right. So Coffee or Kafi, if you want to come on, let me know.
Or a reason to do so. For them subjectively, it is not a blind belief. It is a belief backed by evidence that can only be known on a personal level. One could say they have no evidence to support their experience, which might be true, but what these Christians are actually saying is they have a personal experience they rely on to give their faith or loyalty to Jesus. So faith is not the absence of evidence. It is the effect one has when they are given evidence.
Okay, I had a personal experience that you were wrong. Something gave me this overwhelming feeling to say that this is wrong and that the opposite is true. So how do we decipher that? We need to bring in evidence to decipher that.
And all of this is resolved by just looking at what's known in psychology and what is epistemology. There are 1,000 ways one can interpret one's personal experience. And again, the fact that people of all religions can have a similar experience and then contextualize it in their particular cultural upbringing or religious denomination isn't evidence that particular religion is true, which is evidence that it's a non sequitur. Like you're trying to connect things that don't follow. Evidence doesn't come from personal experience of that kind.
Well, who's to say that gives you the epistemic justification, right? It's like to say that because I had experience X, it entails Y. Y is the case. Like you just affirm the consequent being true. You just are literally trying to self-define the explanation following from the event.
You're just not understanding what evidence is and what epistemic justification is. Like he's conflating being convinced by something with having good reasons to be convinced by something.
He basically just filled that equals gap in with what he was saying at the beginning of trust is not the absence of evidence, but his example on that was to say, I have somebody that trusts an event happened, but nowhere did he give the entailment of the evidence that gave that person the trust. They just gave the fact that they trust the experience. So you didn't really actually provide the part that you care about here in this video, which is what results from evidence. Yeah, and you can't say that the experience is the evidence. You need actual evidence to say that the experience is what you think it was, or reflective of reality. Because, like you said at the beginning of the show, if you have something in your head, you have to be able to discern that. You have to have a method to distinguish that. And that's the part that's being left out when you just say, this idea is in my head that I think is the case. Well, that's fine. You had an experience. But since you already defined this as evidence, propping this up, what is that? It's not very hard.
To place their faith or trust in something or someone. Redefining faith as a lack of evidence is a dishonest tactic and a straw man argument. Now, some bring up places like Mark 6, where it says Jesus could not do mighty.
If you say you have trust and you say it entails evidence, that's fine, but that doesn't necessitate that your trust actually has evidence. Would you agree with that distinction?
Yeah, sure.
That's kind of the issue I'm having. Is like, I don't have a problem with you saying faith is based on trust or equating trust, and then saying trust has to have evidence. Like, I disagree with that. Trust has to have evidence. You can have trust and not have good evidence for it. But for you to say that my faith, my trust has the evidence, well, that's, like we said 1,000 times, that's what I want to see. But it seems to be independent of the fact of like whether or not you actually have good evidence.
He's not providing any good evidence. He's just saying, we have an personal experience and we're convinced by the personal experience. Well, again, that personal experience is not good reasons, because we know things about psychology that religious people want to ignore because it's inconvenient to their perspective.
And he goes back to Mark 6 to beg the question.
Because of their lack of faith or unbelief. But this was not understood as if Jesus needed them to believe in him, or else he was limited in power in some way. like modern heretics like to claim. Jesus could not heal anyone in this area because they did not trust him to do so. They were not willing to be loyal to his lordship and rejected his offer to be healed. This was understood through the...
Got something to say?
What does that have to do with anything? Like,
Yeah, it's a lot of this is non sequitur, and it's not just missing what the evidence is. It's so he's trying to answer: is faith blind?
why would Jesus
so far
be
he's
able to
showing that
heal?
His faith is blind. He's showing his trust is blind.
Why would Jesus being able to heal be dependent on if people believe that he can heal? Shouldn't it be the other way around? Like, they should believe he can heal after he's shown them that he can? Like, well, why should they? It just doesn't make any sense.
ancient custom of the client patronage system. The people in this town rejected Jesus as their patron, and a rejected patron would not force his gifts upon clients who did not trust him or did not want his gifts. So he simply left and moved on. There is no indication, in light of the cultural context, that Jesus needed blind faith from people to heal them. No one there wanted Jesus' lordship or patronage, so they rejected his gift.
That just, I don't know why that cracks me up. It's just Jesus running from everybody. It's like, can't you just like take off and fly away or something? Like, all right,
Of
anyway.
healing. Now, some object that Paul says for people to walk by faith and not by sight. So surely having faith must mean to deny evidence you can empirically see and study. Well, this would be quote mining what Paul is actually saying.
And you would be begging the question.
Full context shows Paul is talking about the hope of being with Christ one day, not denying evidence that may contradict our beliefs. We have faith that we will one day be with Christ, despite how things might appear presently. This relates to what Paul says in Acts 17:31, that we have faith in his future promises because of the evidence we have been given. Think of it like this. Imagine you are married to someone in the CIA, and they contact you to tell you that they are still alive, but the news is going to report that they died for a secret mission. So you have been given the evidence or the assurance they are alive. Yet the news stories seem convincing. They even show what appears to be a very real dead body of your spouse. So do you walk by faith in your spouse or by what you see on the news? In other words, do you walk by faith or sight? Let's say you're at a bar and a friend says that while you were in the bathroom, the guy you were talking with put something in your drink. But you take a look at your drink and it looks fine. The guy you were chatting with appears nice and friendly. But you know your friend would never lie to you about something like this. Do you go about the rest of your night walking by?
Both examples have like, so
They're so bad.
yeah. Well, so the last example there is like, we're not talking about something where you have to, like, we're talking about events that are taking place as they occur, where you can gather the evidence. There's inductive evidence, there's deductive. There's not this like, you're not trying to reason to the best ability based on the text that you have there.
But also with the example with the friend, you have a lifetime of actually seeing things in real time.
Yeah, exactly.
That's not belief in the unseen. You've seen why your friend is trustworthy. So what? It just doesn't make any sense.
By faith in your friend or by what you see? In other words, do you walk by faith or sight?
So he's going to say, like, do you have trust, or by faith, he's going to say you have trust in your friend, not by the fact that you see nothing wrong with the drink or the fact that you think that the guy's fine or whatever. There's nothing that assures the trust of your friend anyway. She might have not saw something. Like, the whole idea behind that to me seems a little weird, to say one guarantees truth and the other doesn't, where it's like, it seems to have its own separate. I mean, for your sake in that case, you're going to have to take the anecdotal testimony of your friend, knowing that she could be wrong with all the intentions to be right. It seems that, like, you just have this weird issue where, I mean, for what you're saying, at least you can kind of corroborate what's going on in real time. But in this case, it's like, it's just not a guarantee. It's not a guarantee for either way. So for you to say I'm going to trust that, it's like in that case for me, I don't drink the drink. But that's if that's even been presented to me, I'm not drinking the drink. But unless it's from Cease, because then I'll let you poison me.
As you can see, walking by faith is not the absence of evidence. It is a belief backed by evidence that is enough to outweigh contradictory evidence that we might encounter.
I just want to know what the evidence is.
So when Paul says to walk by faith and not by sight, he is not saying to deny evidence we see, but that we have enough evidence to trust in Christ's resurrection and promises, despite the way the current world looks, filled with sin and decay. What about doubting Thomas? In John 20, Thomas doubts that Jesus rose from the dead, but then Jesus appears before Thomas to prove that he did in fact rise, and says to him, "Have you believed because you have seen me? Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed." So is Jesus teaching it is better just to have faith and not demand evidence? Well, again, the context can easily address this. Thomas was never asked to believe without evidence. He was stubborn in the face of sufficient evidence. Thomas had the evidence of the empty tomb and numerous close friends telling him the exact same story. Thomas doubted in spite of evidence. So Jesus is not actually saying believe on no evidence.
But when he props those things up and he just says that that's the case, but he has to beg the question to say that's the case. He doesn't have the evidence to say that that's the case. He literally just trusts what he reads and then defines in his own video, his own fucking video. He goes, well, it's backed up by evidence. Okay, cool.
The
now
fact
let
that
me cite something that I'm taking as backed up by evidence without giving you the evidence. I just have to beg the question and say it happened because that's what I read, and I trust that that's the case, despite the fact that I don't have evidence, which is what I'm saying that I have.
The fact that he thinks an empty tomb is evidence for the supernatural, like that it makes more sense that someone can rise from the dead rather than that somehow a body went missing. It's just so telling of the wishful thinking that is in the bias that's present here.
It just blows my mind that in order for you to make a whole point about how faith has evidence, you have to blindly assess that something props this up when at the beginning of that, you don't have the evidence to support that thing that you're using, right? Yeah. That's like, it's making my head spin.
He taught to believe on the sufficient evidence he already provided. So Thomas had enough evidence and still rejected the truth. So he was not as blessed as those who believe without being forced to accept the resurrection. A similar idea can be seen in Hebrews.
I'm 2,000 years removed from even knowing who Thomas is or if he's even a credible person or even existed, but I'll trust it on a lack of evidence.
Well, that's the thing.
My entire point of the video.
This entire thing is based on the presupposition that we can trust the Bible as telling facts. Like, we can't do that, so all of this is meaningless.
11, which is often taken out of context.
Oh, is it? Let's see.
Yeah, of course.
Now, faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. So surely faith must mean a lack of evidence. Well, the immediate context and the surrounding context should be enough to debunk this misunderstanding. This verse contains parallelism. Things not seen is meant to parallel things hoped for. So it should be clear that faith in this verse means trusting God that he will fulfill his promises. Look at the examples that follow.
Hold on. Is trust in God that he will do something in the future?
Don't
you have an... I'm just saying you have a... I mean, it's just funny that someone will say you have a problem of induction, but it's like you have a problem of induction to say, and this is not relevant, but to say, like, how do you know that your God's nature will change from today to tomorrow to be the same that you think it is?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, how do you know God? Or
he's also saying, he's saying that the trust in the future promises is based on the so-called evidence of things that we've seen prior, except that we don't have evidence of those things seen prior. These are just, for a guy, and I could be wrong, but for a guy that had a whole video talking about
science being limited by inductive evidence. It seems that he relies on the same inductive evidence, and then
of course,
and then has a problem where he's going to have to assume inductively that his God is going to have the same nature tomorrow as he did today. And that seems to be based on no evidence, just based on blind faith. But anyway.
Which are meant to clarify the previous statement. All of the people listed were given evidence to trust in God and the promises he made for them and their offspring. In other words, they were given evidence to place their faith or loyalty in God for things hoped for and thereby do the things he commanded.
How do we know this?
Verse 19 even directly says Abraham had faith in or trusted God because he used his reason to realize God could bring Isaac back to life.
I'm sorry I keep pausing, but how many times are we going to beg the question? Like, if I had done this with a biology book and just used other pages to give you assurance that the Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium is true, that would just be stupid. Like, I would actually show you, like, in real life, in real time, with with actual, like, this is what field of computational biology can provide you, right? Like, you can literally observe these things in database, right? So it just blows my fucking mind.
Phil has promised to Abraham that the promise would come through the line of Isaac. The context shows faith is not a lack of evidence. It is being loyal to God or having the assurance in things hoped for. Finally, skeptics bring up Proverbs 3:5-6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make straight your paths. The same idea from Hebrews is here as well. When it says trust in the Lord, and not your own understanding, it should be understood in the context of he will make straight your path. The author is obviously talking about trusting God to guide us along our future path. If we are tempted to sin, we should still trust God's commandment not to sin, even though in the present, it might seem like the best option for us to escape a bad situation, like in the movie Flight. Denzel Washington's character only had to lie to avoid going to jail and lose his pilot's license. But in the end, he rejected the easy way out and told the truth about his addiction and went to jail. But that enabled him to get over his addiction and gain a relationship with his son. The verse in Proverbs is teaching the same idea. Do the good which God commands, even if it seems easier to lie, because ultimately, doing the good will lead to a better outcome, even if we cannot see it through our own present understanding. Plus, there are a wealth of other verses where believers are encouraged to be knowledgeable and not ignorantly follow along on blind faith. Acts 17:11 says the Jews in Berea were more noble because when they received the word, they examined the scriptures to make sure everything Paul said was true. They were noble because they fact-checked Paul and did not believe on blind.
But you are believing all of this on blind faith.
You can't. Examining the scripture is pointless.
We examine the scripture by saying that I have trust in it, but it doesn't provide why he actually has trust in any of what's being said independently. It's just, I'm going to reference something else that props up why. I'm going to use the Bible to prove why the Bible is
right. It's always the same circular problem. It's like you have to show why we should trust the Bible and what it says in the first place. And if you can't do that, then your entire project is meaningless.
It's like he's defeating his own point by saying.
And I loved. Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I love the move when they're like, "Well, can you disprove that the Bible is the Word of God?" It's like you just didn't understand where the word and proof lies. I'm not saying that I know it isn't. I'm saying show me good reasons why I should believe in it.
I'm just kind of mad at myself because I should have known going into this. When we talked on the phone before this, I was like, the only thing I worry about doing, and to Cease's credit, he's trying to branch me onto other ones, but I just kind of like picking on Inspiring Philosophy's videos since they're popular and a lot of people send them to me. But every video we've done with him, he wastes our time through the entire thing, never providing what actually matters. Because, like, cool, we're defining his faith blind, and he's saying off the bat that it's not. Cool, we could be done there. Me and Michael agree, like, in the sense of that if he defines faith as trust, and that his trust needs to have evidence, I would agree. I could say you could still have trust without it, but if he's valuing the evidence in virtue of the trust, cool, we're on board. But the second he goes to citing verses to prop up certain thing or arguments that he's making, he has to do that 2,000 years removed from the events, not knowing anybody, and having this idea that he can trust that without independent evidence, but just citing more evidence, quote unquote evidence through scripture, just begging the question.
Right. No, but yes, of course he's going to waste our time, but they all more or less are going to. But I think it's important that we break these clips down to show where the errors in the thinking are found.
I just didn't think he'd defeat his own point, I guess, but.
Oh, I fully expect him. That's what he always does.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, we'll try to truck through this.
Faith. Matthew 6 also contains a good example. To know if God will provide for us, Jesus says to use your reason. Consider the birds of the air, or the lilies of the field. If they are cared for, and if we are more loved by God, then logically it follows that God will also provide for us. In other words, don't just trust God on blind faith, but reason from what we see in the natural world to arrive at a sound conclusion. So given the full context of the Bible...
Didn't that just contradict what he was...
It just doesn't make any sense.
Doesn't that contradict... I mean, he's trying to rationalize it, but I don't see how that doesn't contradict Proverbs 3:5-6.
And the context of the verse itself. There's no reason this verse, like other passages, are encouraging blind faith. So once we understand what faith means from a biblical understanding, we can see there is no reason to think Christians are encouraged to believe without evidence or remain ignorant. Through various examples given in this video, claiming faith is a lack of evidence.
Every example you gave was scripture, begged the question, and you didn't provide actual evidence to how you know that from the source you're taking from is credible in any way.
Is to define faith in a dishonest way that is inconsistent.
The only thing dishonest here is your assessment of taking evidence, which is a great thing that you should do, but then deciding to not actually prop it up for all your examples. That to me, that's the dishonest part.
It's what we actually mean when we say we have faith in our friend, or in our bank, or even in our God. There is no reason Christian faith means a lack of evidence. It is loyalty or assurance in God because we have good evidence.
Oh my God, we got through it. I didn't die. We're here. Woo!
And he didn't provide one shred of evidence in this entire thing.
So
it really is. It's impressive, his complete detachment from what actual evidence is. Like, it's, I don't know.
Yeah. I would agree. Whatever happened was weird on that, by the way. It says that we've only been live for 11 minutes. I don't know why it says that. You see that on my thing. I hope that's not the case. People in the comments, you've been with us the whole time. So I have evidence in my trust, right, to say that we've been actually live for this whole time. But
the StreamYard is crazy.
But you see that at the top, right? I just wanted to know if I'm the only one.
No, mine says 1:11. So maybe it's just showing 11.
Gotcha. I was just like, all right, well, at least we have the evidence of the... See, I can appeal to the evidence of the comments to say we were live. I can look at the timestamp and go, okay, I was live, right? But I wouldn't just sit there for the whole time and go, hey, well, I think that this is true. I really, really think it's true. And I think that the really, really thinking it's true part depends on evidence. But let me define this using the exact same source that I need to define it with the entire time instead of an independent one. You know, it's like...
Wait, quick question, because I think I forgot to ask in the beginning. That other channel that you wanted to talk about, God, what is her name?
Deflate.
Yeah. Do you have the other clip ready or no?
I don't, but I can pull something up. I can look at something. Oh wait, was okay.
Well, if I'm afraid that if we try that, it might freeze everything, and
it could, but I don't think so.
What was the one we had talked about doing?
There was another inspiring philosophy one. I think we should dedicate that to a full video, maybe. I'm looking at Deflate and see if he's got like maybe a 5-minute video we could look at.
Yeah, it was the one. Oh man, what was it? Hold on.
Atheism, not a lack of belief. That should be an episode we should do, like a full episode.
Yeah, but it wasn't that one. It was a different one. Let me see if I can find it real quick.
Oh gosh, his thing just started in my head. But yeah, so this was an impromptu for anyone that's joining that's new. This is an impromptu kind of one. We just kind of wanted to go over just a random little video that we decided about 15 minutes before we came on here. But usually what we have experts or non-experts, really anybody that's willing to come on the show about certain things. So appreciate any of the new subscribers. This is kind of a lax episode until we get back in the thick of things.
The one I was thinking about was atheism is the real crutch, not religion.
Yeah, I see that one right there.
I'm afraid that if you click, it's all gonna break, but we can always try.
Yeah, knowing StreamYard is so far so good. Oh, I read there was a video right next to it said Dr. Michael Shermer, God does not exist. I read it as Dr. Michael Shermer does not exist. I was like, whoa, I've seen him. I have evidence for that.
I haven't heard this video, so I just want to see.
I haven't either. I'm trying to get it up. Hopefully, you're right. Hopefully, it doesn't freeze. I think we're good.
God.
I think we're good. All right, let's try it.
If it freezes, we'll be back.
Okay, it went to full screen. It's good.
Say that religion is just a psychological crutch. That is, it's a nice way to comfort people in the face of the harsh realities of life. However, belief in God is nonsense. What you will learn in this video is why this argument not only gloriously fails, but completely undermines the atheist case.
Oh, it's going to be great.
This is Lucas from Deflate, countering the skeptics' objections to Christianity. If you're new here, click that subscribe button to get our upcoming videos. So let's say my friend Charlie breaks his leg in a car accident. He's brought to the hospital, undergoes an operation, and has a cast put on his leg. During his recovery, I pay him a visit. After 15 minutes of sitting and talking in his room, we decide to get coffee and take a walk in the park surrounding the hospital. As he gets out of bed, Charlie tells me, "Hey, just grab me those crutches, please, will you?" Now, what will I do? Get the crutches, of course. But imagine I said this, "Hey, Charlie, come on, those are just crutches. They may help you walk with your broken leg, but why would you want them?" Now, would that make any sense? Obviously not. Or imagine I said, "Hey, Charlie, you know, these crutches aren't real. They just make you feel better." Clearly, such an answer would be nothing but absurd. And yet, exactly the same logic is used when atheists claim that people believe in God.
Okay, just wanted to see his intel. I
literally feel dumber for just having heard that.
Yeah. What's like, that Billy Madison thing? It's like everybody now feels dumber for having it. Yeah.
I mean, the fact that you can't tell the difference between a psychological crutch based on wishful thinking and an actual like physical crutch that like legitimately can help you walk around, like empirically do so.
Well,
it doesn't entail any beliefs.
Well, it'd be funny if he's like an idealist too, and then now he's like deliberate, or not an idealist, but like a dualist or something, and he's conflating some physical thing and mind, right? It's like, how does that work exactly? It's like I will use something that's clearly immaterial and compare from my worldview and compare it with something physical like a crutch.
Autumn breaks it down really well. The broken leg isn't real in this scenario. You're walking with crutches for no reason.
That's that's. I think she just defeated the entire video. We don't have to say anything. So that's pretty much it.
The only thing he's deflating is his own credibility. Like, it's just so bad. How do people? I don't know.
Because it makes them feel better, and therefore the belief itself cannot be taken seriously. The argument originates with none other than the famous psychoanalyst Sigmund Freud, who said in his book, Futures of an Illusion, "We tell ourselves that it would be very nice if there was a God who created the world, and if there were a moral order in the universe and an afterlife. But it is the very striking fact that all this is exactly as we are bound to wish it to be." In other words, Freud thinks that because the notion of a loving God and of purpose corresponds to what we wish for, it is doubtful that these things would actually exist. And atheists have made use of the Freudian argument ever since. But how is it logical to say that just because we desire a thing, this thing doesn't exist? Well, it isn't logical. Not only that, but the exact...
Yeah, let me pull that back up. All right,
exact opposite actually seems to be much more plausible. I mean, have you ever felt the desire for really good food? Well, guess what? Really good food exists. Or have you ever felt the longing for a relationship of genuine trust, honesty, and love? Guess what? Such relationships can actually be realized. Or have you ever had the desire to experience beauty in a way that opens up your imagination and gives you a sense of transcendence? Guess what? Music that causes goosebumps and inspiring art do exist, as well as breathtaking landscapes and scenic vistas. And so really, just because we may long for there to be a loving God, meaning, and an afterlife, simply doesn't mean that these things are an illusion.
Okay, so let's stop.
Why is he talking about things that we can objectively observe? Like, what has that something to do with anything? Like, and nobody's saying that just because we want something to be true, it automatically makes it false. It's saying that when you believe in it without actual evidence and justification, and what is driving is wishful thinking, then it's more likely that the belief is based on something psychological rather than something actual.
Yeah, let's look at homeopathic, any person that's advocating for homeopathic remedies. I mean, they long for those to be actual cures, right? But it doesn't entail the truth value, nor does it entail the falsity. It's independent of what you're going to actually use to.
His analogies are embarrassing because, yeah, art exists independently of the fact that we like it. It's not the fact that we like it that is a reason to believe it exists. It's the fact that we can see that it exists. Like, I don't even know what to say to that.
In fact, these longings give us good reasons to at least take the concepts they correspond to seriously. And that's because...
But this is just highlighting a problem of underdetermination. Like, you could take anything and just literally have some post hoc rationalization. Like, you could do this with literally anything.
Our common experience tells us that the desires we have are usually satisfied by things that are in fact real. But that's not even the biggest flaw in the atheist's wobbly psychological crutch argument, because the truth is that the whole thing backfires on them. Consider this. If people only believe in God because they want him to be real, even though he isn't, as the atheist tries to enlighten us, couldn't it also be that atheists don't believe in God because they don't want him to be real, even though he is? It surely could be, because we're simply returning the favor and apply to the atheist the exact same kind of...
Yeah, he's trying to do a reductio, but no, I don't think any atheist is just saying that you only believe in God because you want to. Like,
anybody who's motivated by wishful thinking on your side is incorrect in their approach.
Yeah, doesn't entail that everybody is under the same basis. At least that's what I would say.
What this guy doesn't understand is that it's the belief with lack of evidence that points to it being wishful thinking. It's not that there's a problem with wanting something to be true or a problem with not wanting something to be true. That's not what's motivating serious people into seeing whether or not their beliefs are justified. It's what we're pointing to is the fact that religious people have no credible evidence, but believe despite of that fact, and that points to something psychological. He's completely missing the most important issue, which is the lack of evidence in the first place.
Reasoning he or she is using. And the funny thing is that some of the most prominent atheist thinkers confirm what I just said. Take Thomas Nagel, for example, an atheist and former professor of philosophy at New York University, who confesses, It isn't just that I don't believe in God. I don't want there to be a God. I don't want the universe to be like that. So, as we've seen so often, atheists end up deflating their very own case by putting forward their flawed argument.
So if they want, wait. So Nagel is the representation of every atheist? I didn't realize that.
But also, that's not, even if he said that, that doesn't show that that is the driving force behind his atheism. If it was, then he'd be wrong in his approach. It just doesn't make sense. Like, that's not.
Well, it's weird too. In this, it's like me and you. We reference what it's like to be a bat, but I think me and you read that paper, and it does probably
Different.
more. Yeah, does more for you as an argument than maybe myself. And so the entailment there is to say like that I would agree with everything Nagel would even have to say. Is just a weird concept to hold your hat on.
Well, no, you wouldn't agree with Nagel because, well, I guess.
Just my point is to say that when he says it backfires for atheists, citing one atheist, it's just an appeal to authority. It's just weird. It's like,
but this guy is making a completely false comparison, because the entire point is that the religious people lack the evidence that they require to be justified in their beliefs. My atheism arises from the observation that atheists don't have evidence.
You mean theists?
Yeah, the theists don't have evidence. Like, I'm not going. There's no way, as an atheist, I can disprove God. No one needs to do that. I believe based on the evidence. And if you have good evidence, then provide that.
It does look like.
Oh my god, it kind of does. That's so weird.
Oh god, he's like hold it together, but that's really funny.
This one's funny too.
Oh, sorry, that's my bad.
Wait, there you go.
How does Nate Dogg on a bad day? I was like, Nate. Oh, Nate. Oh god, that's great. Okay, let's get through this. Where are we
against theism.
Right.
But there is more. Given that atheists keep shouting from the rooftops that they only hold views which are backed up with data, it's nothing but fair to ask, what's the evidence for the argument that religion is nothing but a psychological crutch?
I hold a belief that
Well,
as real fast, I hold that belief that aliens exist, but I don't really have any data for that. I mean, anyway.
He says, what is the data for the belief? The observation that you can't provide any credible evidence for your positions. So when you lack that, then all that's left is wishful thinking. Like, it's pretty simple.
Well, for starters, it's rather ironic that no other than Freud himself admitted to another psychoanalyst at the time that the views expressed in my book, The Future of an Illusion, form no part of...
Ravi Zacharias was a creep, therefore all Christians are a creep. Like, I'm not understanding why he goes to, like, I mean, I don't even know what Freud's position really was. I had a psychology 101 class in college, and a lot of it was on Freud, but I don't remember any of it. But citing Nagel and like that's the part I don't get over. It's like, and maybe it's because I've seen his videos and he does this a lot, where it's like, even the atheist Richard Dawkins. I'm like, I don't give a shit what Dawkins has to say. There's just nothing. Like, I respect him, but he's not me. You know what I mean? Like, we just share one position that your God doesn't have evidence or doesn't exist, depending on which, if we take X as false or I'm not convinced of X aspect of atheism. But it's so weird to me that he relies on that crutch all the time, that this guy said this. It's like, I wouldn't point out Ravi Zacharias or some priest in the Catholic Church, with the obvious entailment of something horrible they've done, and say that that's all Catholics. It just seems weird to me. But
analytic theory, they are my personal views. Wow, I'm impressed. In other words, there is not a shred of evidence for the argument that religion is just a psychological crutch. Instead, it's based on nothing but Freud's personal opinion, or to put it bluntly, his own wishful thinking. So I guess the Freudian crutch argument.
No, it's based on the fact that you can't provide any rational argument or credible evidence to believe in any of your claims. Like the entire argument doesn't come from one person, particular psychology. Like
you're talking about the deflate guy,
like he's talking about the fact that Freud said that means the entire argument has no basis. Like no, the reason why I shared that belief that it's religion is based on wishful thinking is because you can't provide any credible evidence or rational argument as to why I should believe in the claims that you want to make.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you don't have those things, all you're left with is wishful thinking or misunderstandings of what the evidence is.
I think this right here is a really good distinction. Something that I've been talking to, I can't remember who I was talking to this the other day, but their worldview is based on supreme authority. Of course, they make appeals to authority all the time. And that's, I've noticed, is this aspect between like why some atheists or theists don't agree with the atheist definition that some atheists will apply with a lack of belief, because they deal in such Cartesian certainty all the time, or some authority, right? So that they parallel that on the other side with that. And so I think Physics Police makes a really good comment there to say that that's where they appeal to the same way where they try to drag you down to you're religious, or you use the same crutch, or you have faith, or those types of things. It seems to kind of be that through that case. Oh, hey, shout out to Jesus Unfollower. Hey, I saw this Jesus. Oh yeah, that was the first time you saw me, Jesus Unfollower. Shout out. Which, by the way, I know he lives close. I don't know how close, but like at least within a state. So we gotta get a beer sometime.
Argument used by atheists is itself nothing but a psychological crutch, which the supposedly evidence-loving atheist is desperately clinging to. Now, those atheists who hope that maybe sometime in the future there will be evidence supporting the crutch argument are terribly mistaken, I have to say. I'm sorry. Why? Because the reasoning behind it is diametrically opposed to the laws of logic and commits what is called the genetic fallacy. What does this mean? Well, the way you come to believe in something has nothing to do with the question whether the content of your belief is true or false. For example, I could have learned about Richard Dawkins having written his PhD on chicken behavior from a YouTube video, his grandmother, my grandmother, a book, or even through a dream. The truth that Dawkins' PhD is about chickens is simply not affected by the way I attained the knowledge of it. In the same way, it could be that people believe in God because they need comfort, and it certainly is the case that belief in God offers hope. I have no problem admitting that, but so what? Anyone who jumps on that and says that therefore the belief itself is false simply hasn't understood the basic principles of logic. Furthermore, anyone who thinks
the basic principles of logic, I'm trying to.
Guys are.
Yeah, I'm
sorry. Like I try to not insult the people that we analyze because that's just kind of shitty. But when he just doesn't know, we're not saying that we know it's false because it's likely psychological. We're saying that we believe it's psychological because you can't provide any actual justification. Like,
yeah.
Oh,
I'll wait.
That following Christ is a right.
No, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to respond to this comment real quick. I parody the atheist and say personal experience is the worst evidence that there is. What will convince me? I don't know, but I'll know when I personally experience it. No, I mean, again, I can't speak. I don't know what is this strange.
Yeah, I don't know about worst evidence there is. I wouldn't say that. I would just say that it's necessarily first person and that it only applies to you. But
I would probably say that. But
you would say it's the worst. You would say it's the worst evidence.
Yeah, I think anecdote. I mean, again, it depends on the context. If you're describing the experience of running into a friend, we can trust that testimony probably happened. If your personal experience is that you saw Jesus flying in your bedroom, Like, that's a bit of a different thing. It's a different type of claim. And I don't say that I don't know what would convince me. What would convince me is the same type of evidence that we use for any kind of belief in science. Like, provide me with a framework that has the same type of scientific evidence, testability, repeatability, predictions, and I'll believe it. Like, it has to go through that kind of methodology. And if you can show why your claims can be supported through that methodology, then I'll believe it.
Yeah, and the reason why I say I don't think it's the worst evidence is because I would say taking someone else's personal experience is even worse than, you know, that. Right. But yeah, I'd still say it's bad evidence. But I wouldn't add his entailment at the end. That's like, but I know when I personally experience it, I know I would concede that I probably won't. Like, an alien could visit me at the foot of my bed tonight, and I'm not going to say, hey, I had a personal experience. That means aliens exist. As it means I had a personal experience. I might need to go get an fMRI. I might need to go get checked out. I might have saw an alien. There's a lot of aspects that could be. I'm not going to abductively get an inference to the best possible explanation there, because that wouldn't be smart. That would just be a way for me to get a hypothesis. But
he says, wouldn't that methodology be filtered to your personal experience? I feel like that's kind of missing the point. I'm not saying, obviously,
not
any methodology, any of that is coming through our subjective experience, but we can talk about subjective experience in an objective way, applying certain standards. Like,
yeah, it's what like Birch and Russell outlines at the beginning of Problems of Philosophy when he uses the example of like looking at the chair, right, or looking at a table. There's something objectively there, regardless of how you might. If you're farther back than me, the light might hit it differently. You might get a different wood grain, experience of the wood grain than I might, depending on my location, right? But at the same time, regardless of our subjective experience, we're corroborating an objective thing that's there in between us.
In science, we're talking about peer review, we're talking about testability, we're talking about experimentation, we're talking about novel predictions. Just personal experience doesn't entail any of those things. Now, if you can add those things to your personal experience and provide the methodology, then that's what matters.
Yeah. All right, let's try crunch.
On pink clouds with the Heavenly Father constantly tapping on your shoulder no matter what you do, simply doesn't understand what Christianity is about. Now, I'm of course aware that there's a good amount of Christians out there who actually think that, and that's unfortunate. Nevertheless, the truth is that Jesus called those who follow him to deny themselves, to forgive no matter what, to love without boundaries, including their enemies, and to continuously stretch themselves in generosity, kindness, and self-sacrifice.
I don't think he's been very kind. I'm not saying I'm being kind to him, but I don't think as a Christian, he's been very kind to atheists through the videos I've watched. He seems to be very demeaning and very un-Christ-like, but that's just my observation.
I don't have a problem with arrogance, honestly, but it has to be earned. When you're that arrogant and you're that just delusional in the way in which you approach these topics, and you make such terrible examples and confuse philosophy on such a rudimentary level, it's just embarrassing. Like,
Christianity holds that there will actually be a final reckoning where people will be held accountable for everything they've done. Therefore,
unless they repent to Jesus and they're all good.
Karl Marx was simply wrong when he said that religion is the opium of the people. And so are the atheists in his stead, who put together the Humanist Manifesto and claimed that traditional religions offer solace to humans. The standards Jesus put up for his followers do not offer solace, nor do they have any of the soothing effects of opium. On the contrary, following through with what Jesus taught is a challenge, which is why he told everyone to count the costs before committing to him. Compare that to atheism, which ultimately implies that you're a law unto yourself. Now, I am not saying that atheists
No, it doesn't. It doesn't imply that at all. It just implies that I don't believe in God.
Are a bunch of anarchists going around wreaking havoc. No, But the fact remains that in atheism, you ultimately won't be held accountable for any of your actions, no matter what you do. Add to
None of this is evidence. Like, even if I agreed with him that I do want there to be justice for people in the world in some way, beyond their life or something, like this goes back to the wishful thing. The fact that I really want that to be the case isn't going to make that true. It seems that we're kind of revisiting the problem here of the wishful thinking. It's like, I'm not. The issue seems to be you're okay with not having the evidence and then eventually siding with the wishful thinking. Whereas I look at it and I go, hey, it might be a world at which people aren't punished for horrible crimes, right? That might actually be the case. Well, I'm not going to let my emotional bias on that of what could be objectively the case get in the way. If that's the way the world is, if the way the world is that way, like, my emotions can't dictate that. No amount of wishful thinking is going to change that. The same way, if you don't want to be a determinist and you want to have, full agent causation, right? You want to feel like you actually make the choices you do. I think there's inherently problems with that idea we can get into, but it's to not accept determinism just because you don't prefer it or you want to wishful think your way to libertarian free will. This is not a good way of assessing the objective world around you.
this the fact that selfishness comes far easier to us humans than the self-sacrificial lifestyle Jesus demands. And it seems safe to say that it's actually atheism which offers comfort and consolation for those who don't want to face the challenge of accountability. That's exactly what the Nobel Prize-winning author Czeslaw Miłosz expressed when he said that a true opium of the people is a belief in nothingness after death, the huge solace of thinking that for our betrayals, greed, cowardice, murders, we are not going to be judged.
Okay, this is severely idiotic.
Yeah, is the true opium knowing if your brother or someone or you love dies and is that true opium to know that you'll just die and not some people want to see that, right? But
just because we're not going to be judged in an afterlife doesn't mean that we're not being judged or care about those things in this life. Like, as an atheist, I hold myself accountable and other people accountable for any kind of problematic behavior, and I try to become a better person. It's not like I'm an atheist there, and because God isn't there to judge me in the afterlife, I'm going to go around and not care about how my actions affect people. No, it's like, if this is the only life I have and one day I'll be dead, then I want to make this life, I want to, it's another reason to live morally, because I care about the only well-being that I'm going to experience and the well-being of other people that it's called empathy. This is just terrible thinking.
Yeah, and I would agree with atheist cats and say that if anything, it gives you more value because if I know my car is just going to last forever, I probably won't take value in assessing the brakes and all these types of things to maintain it, or my cat, right? It's like, am I really going to feel the need to hug my dog or someone I love if there's not that endpoint of that to me seems to be weird that someone can derive this solace that way. I would have solace knowing that I'd be able to see them again as long as I commit any horrible crime I want, as long as I get on my knees and pray to Jesus. That's a very, very fucking easy way to get out of a horrible situation. So for him to prop it up that way when he has a very easy scapegoat to get out of the accountability aspect of it is very ironic to me. But
so Jana has a good idea, which I agree with her actually. Why don't we do a Q&A with the chat people? That would be more interesting because this video is low-hanging fruit. Let's do a Q&A. I think we should do that because this guy is...
Well, we're at the end of the video anyway, so that's fine.
So what questions do you guys have?
Yeah, if you have some questions, that's fine. I got to close out here in a minute, though. Let me get something propped up for the thing here. Here we go. Mute Oz. So if anyone doesn't know, go head over to the Atheist Roundtable and leave them a comment on one of their videos. #MuteOz. Apologies to Pasta Mike. We didn't have enough time for you tonight. We'll probably get you on the show at some point, hopefully here in the future.
Also, real quick, modern physics is indeterministic. I would go back to watch some of the videos we had with a quantum physicist on our show, because that's not quite accurate. It's not quite that simple.
Sorry to answer this one out of this just caught my eye initially, but I'll go back to the other question. Can you try your best to defend the supernatural doesn't exist? I'm not a metaphysical naturalist, but if you were to say, like, if I had to or something like that, it wouldn't be a very good argument, because I'm not a metaphysical naturalist. But yeah, I mean, it would be hard for me to, in the sense of that, like, I don't like appealing to a black swan fallacy to say it's because I don't have evidence of some metaphysical claim that it therefore doesn't exist. That seems to be sloppy from my perspective, which is why I don't concede to metaphysical naturalism, because I have a limited scope of knowledge.
Yeah, I would say the same thing. I don't make, for the most part, any kind of claims to certainty outside of the cogito, which is the only thing I'm certain about.
Yeah, same here. And even then I would say you would have to take a non-inferential route in regards to, like, your ontology there. But anyway, Young Hitchens, smash or pass? Cecil, I'll let you start the answer on that one.
Smash.
Smash. All right, sure, smash. Now we've gotten that out of the way. Crows against Jeff.
No, definitely not.
No.
I'm done. That was already hard enough for me to do. That stuff makes me cringe.
He's just gonna step in the octagon and put the gloves on. So
yeah, I'll let my debating speak for itself at that point. This one, give us your best idea of God. Your best.
Give us your best idea of God. I don't know. I don't know if I know what that means. Your best idea, like what would be the best God in the world? A God that would come and fix 25,000 people starving every day, amongst other issues.
Yeah, I got that would resolve the problem of evil. Would be
a good
yeah.
Are either of you closeted theists? No, definitely not.
No.
I try not to be closeted at anything. If I can, I try to be as honest as I can, but I don't, obviously we're human, but the theist part is definitely not the worry. Though I would admit that if someone could substantiate intentionality or mind with a lot of naturalistic arguments, with theistic arguments that kind of parallel certain naturalistic arguments, whether you go down like a route of contingency or some things like that, that maybe someone like Graham Oppy will kind of grant you an argument. I'm going to say the closest I could get to you there is substantiate the premise that there's a mind and intentionality between that necessary natural thing, and I'm a theist. I just think that is, I don't think you can a priori do that. Like, you can't a priori define apples into existence. You can't use propositional logic to define cars exist. They just show relations between, X to Y and things like that. So, yeah.
Geosam, I think we actually did a video on this. We'll definitely revisit.
We haven't yet. We haven't done it yet.
Didn't we address some of the stuff when my brother was on?
You might have brought the 5 ways to him, but we haven't done a full video on it.
A full video, yeah, that's what I mean. Like, we haven't done a full video, but we went through some of them in one of the previous episodes. It will take a little too long to get into it now, but basically, most of it relies on the need for causality or a first cause, and that's also based on observations about motion and potentiality and actuality.
Mm-hmm.
It's modern physics resolves those assumptions, and I know Thomists hate when I say this, but it's, as far as I'm concerned, the reality here.
So yeah, on my personal page for JMike, I have like 11 subscribers. I just started uploading guitar videos. So yeah, you can check those out. I didn't see that question. And then JMike play better guitar than T-Jump. T-Jump's only played for like 2 years. I've played for like 15 or 16, so it's a very unfair. Where he's at 2 years is better than I was at 2 years. Like by an exponential margin. So we should compare where he's at year 16 to where I'm at. He was supposed to come over to my house and play, and then he hung out with girls instead. Bastard.
You can
I kind of forgot to, and whatnot. But anyway, what is the song used? I don't remember. I used something that was just copyright royalty free.
Good song, though.
Yeah, so I'll have to go back. Someone's asked that too, but I just looked for something that was royalty free.
Would I ever put a heroic dose of a psychedelic on my bucket list? No, I'm. Well, as far as the fact that wouldn't challenge my atheism in any way, like the fact that I could change my perception for a certain period of time wouldn't provide any evidence to trust one belief over another. Like the fact that I could take psychedelics and hallucinate God talking to me wouldn't add any additional reason to believe in that claim. So that would be pointless regardless. But no, I don't drink. I don't do drugs. I've been around that stuff. I have friends that have done stuff. It's not that, but it's not for me. I've honestly lived a straight edge life my whole life. I've never had a drink of alcohol. It's just not my thing at this point in time.
I don't want to skip over his. My thing on that is I don't personally like to get into that kind of stuff, but I would just say that I'm not arguing outside of experience. That's all I would say. So for most of that in my past, and that's why I was someone that I would consider spiritual at some point, in a sense. But I realized that all I was doing was just employing some kind of wishful thinking, and I found a lot more gratitude at looking at the world as natural to the best of my knowledge, and that's actually given me more of a kind of in-depth personal, whether you call it spiritual or whatever, that's given me more of a real feeling that I connect with in nature than something that seems to be artificial. So that's what I would say.
Yeah, I mean, to think that drugs will prove God, or that if you haven't done it, you can't know that. No, it's just a matter of knowing what epistemology is. Like, what type of arguments consist or count as justifications.
Yeah, to put a chemical that you take that does something, like that, or in a few hours, on par with the amount of effort that someone like Cease or his brother, I'm only self-taught in philosophy, but for us to sit down and read and do all these things, and to say that knowledge can be comparable to some drug that you take, I would just disagree with off the bat. And then also I would just say in retrospect to having done both and then having look at other people, there's no knowledge being gained from what they're doing. There's knowledge being gained from this side of the aisle, but there's nothing on that side of the aisle. So it's like it's been demonstrated to just be useless from my position. Otherwise, we would have gained knowledge somehow. Right.
What philosophy did you study for your degree? I mean, everything. My primary interest at first was moral philosophy. I've seen since moved beyond that. Phenomenology is probably my primary interest. Philosophy of mind and language are right up there. Some political philosophy, although not quite as interesting to me, but some of that as well. I would say those three: phenomenology, philosophy of language, and philosophy of mind. And of course, I mean, existentialism, I think, is the most useful on a practical basis. So that's always there as well. They're all interconnected. So I would say that my interests lie across all, the whole spectrum. But yeah.
I'm working on it now, but behind the scenes, I'm trying to cheat to get him to win. No, I'm just kidding. No. Yeah, well, I'm right. I'm writing his acceptance speech. It's just going to say, fuck you, I won, or something. Yeah, no. I'll just be like, I'm going to hand it to him. Be like, here. Anyway.
Philosophy of science is interesting, but there's a lot of really garbage philosophy there. Like, there are some that's really good, and I appreciate, and I think are very valuable, and that avoid leading to scientism.
Yeah. But
there's also a lot of philosophy of science that just completely doesn't understand what science is actually doing. And
thank you, Physics Police. Yeah, thank you to everybody that we went from 550 to 750.
That's crazy.
In 2 days. So big shout out to the ACA, Talk Heathen, Eric Murphy, the crew, all those guys really helped, as well as all the people that joined from that.
You did really well on that show. I think that was really beneficial. That was an awesome appearance. You completely schooled some of those pre-ups on there. It was really, it was great to watch.
Nicer to Bill, or not Bill, but Rick, the older guy. It's just that when he was like, "You guys are being condescending," and Eric was like, "Look, there's a whole bunch of apologetics that you're not familiar with." I realized halfway through I was talking about like the modal ontological argument. And I was like, "Oh yeah, this guy doesn't know any of that." So the only thing I would say in hindsight, like I said at the beginning, is to make sure I don't use certain language when I know it's clearly not beneficial to the audience or the people that I'm talking to.
Thomas Kuhn, there are things about what it says that I think make sense and that are fair, and there are things that I think are just misconceptions. And I think a lot of people have also misinterpreted some of his work. I mean, I don't know. I have my issues with him, I would say, but yeah. Oops. There we go.
We got one more. What's up?
Any other questions? I think that may have been it.
Might be it. Yep. Yeah. So thank you guys for tuning in. We appreciate it. If you want to help us out in the future, here in I think a week or so, I'm going to set up a Patreon. It'll be like, I think the tiers will be $1, $5, and $10, and I'll have to figure out kind of what benefits the $10 will get versus the $1 and things like that to make it fair. I had someone reach out to me and ask me to create a Patreon, which I had told myself, I was like, I don't think we should do that until maybe someone reaches out, and then we'll know, okay, there's people willing to support us and we don't have to just flaunt that. We want to be as transparent as possible, but it will help us. It'll help us pay for StreamYard, help us pay for maybe microphones and things like that. But regardless if anybody does it, we'll still be here doing what we love, but it will just be an added bonus. So we appreciate that. We're 250 from being monetized and being able to do super chats and things like that. And so yeah, just that'll be really cool if we grow this thing, and maybe it can help make the quality of the show better. But CCI, you want to mention anything before we head off?
No, again, Saturday, I think it's Saturday. Well, March 20th. I think it starts around 3 p.m. Eastern time. The Ultimate Debate Championship, I'll be competing there. And yeah,
let me actually pull that up for them and get you there. So if anybody in the comments hasn't, there is the Atheist Roundtable, which is me and Cease have been on there. I started it with them back in the day, about a year or so ago, and they are going real strong. They've hit over 2,000 subscribers. Let's see. Okay, is it shared? Yeah. So go here, and there's a countdown video that they just did about a day ago. And then also, if you guys really want like good content, they do debates, things like that. So there's a really good debate with Dr. Josh and, or not Dr. Josh, I'm sorry, Captain Dadpool and Bram. I can't remember his last name. But go check that out. Very good debate on the resurrection. But yeah, go give them support. Thank you guys. Much love. And we will see you maybe, I don't know, tomorrow or sometime this week.
Yeah. Thanks, guys.
Peace out.